So I'd like to begin by thanking Pureland Marketing for helping to host these teachings and for all the wonderful volunteers from Pureland Marketing and from Friends of Shrivasti Abbey, Singapore, for putting all their efforts into organizing the teachings. They haven't even had their dinner yet because they've been working so hard, but really want to acknowledge their kindness. And then I also wanted to point out, if you see these beautiful lotus flowers here, there and there, they're made by one of the volunteers at Pureland Marketing. And he makes them every year handmade, and they're so beautiful. So I really want to acknowledge that too, for helping to create a very nice atmosphere for us to have the teachings. So every year, for a number of years, I've been teaching this book, A Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life. It also was published in another translation. This translation is by Stephen Batchelor. I think that the text that you have, the translation is by Vesna and Alan Wallace. So sometimes the verse I read and the verse you have written in here, they may not be word for word the same, but it can be very interesting to hear different translations of the same verse, because it gives you different ways of looking at it. This text is one of my all-time favorite texts. I was fortunate to first listen to it, hear teachings on it, just after I was ordained back in 1977. And one of my teachers, Geshe Zopa, taught this. It's an absolutely amazing text because Shantideva, this 8th century Indian sage, he talks right from his heart to our heart. And the way he writes the verses is as if he's talking to himself. So it gives us a way to kind of contemplate and meditate on the verses. You know, if we read the verse, it's like talking to ourselves and then really thinking about what we said. And this, we're on chapter 6 now, because I've been teaching it for a number of years. And last year we finished up to verse 12. But I want to give you just a brief rundown of the book. The first chapter, okay, is on the benefits of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is that altruistic intention seeking enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. It's sometimes translated as the awakening mind, the altruistic intention. I just use the Sanskrit name, which is bodhicitta. So the first chapter, he talks about the benefits of this amazing aspiration to work for the long-term well-being of each and every living being. And then in chapter 2, he talks about confessing and clearing up all our negativities. So the second chapter is called Disclosure of Wrongdoing. And so if we're going to have this beautiful altruistic intention that's imbued by love and compassion, we need to clear out our negative karma. And the way to clear out our negative karma is first to acknowledge it, and then to make a determination not to do it again, to restore our relationship as best as we can with whoever we harmed, either the 3 jewels or other sentient beings, and to do some kind of remedial practice. So that's talked about in the second chapter. Then in the third chapter, he explains how to actually how to take the Bodhisattva vow, because having purified our negativities, then our mind is ready and open and receptive to make a really strong determination to work for the benefit of all beings. So that's explained in chapter 3. Chapter 4 is conscientiousness, and talks about now that we've generated bodhicitta and we've invited all the infinite number of sentient beings to benefit from our Dharma practice, let's be conscientious and not lose the bodhicitta and not act in a negative way, okay, but to really value our ethical conduct. Then the 5th chapter is on developing mindfulness and introspective awareness. Sometimes it's translated as alertness or vigilance. And mindfulness is the mind that keeps awareness of our precepts and our values and our principles. And introspective awareness checks up from time to time to see if we're still focusing on the love and compassion and altruism and ethical conduct that we want to be focused on. So that's the 5th chapter. Then the 6th chapter is on patience. I used to translate the term kshanti, that's the Sanskrit term, as patience, as he does here in this book. But in the last couple of years, I began to really think in a deeper way about the meaning of the Sanskrit word. And it seems to me that it really means fortitude. It means how to make our mind strong, how to develop inner strength, okay? So patience sometimes works as a translation, but in English, patience sometimes means, like when you're waiting for somebody, they say just be patient. But that's not the real meaning of the word kshanti. It isn't just sitting around waiting for somebody to do something or for something to happen. It's really developing our inner strength, our inner fortitude. Okay? And that's such an incredible, important factor to develop in our life and especially in our spiritual practice. We have to have inner strength. Yeah, and inner strength comes about through having inner clarity, through being able to distinguish what to practice and what to abandon, what is virtuous, what is non-virtuous. Yeah, what is really in our heart and what are the crazy ideas and notions that sometimes pass through our heart. We have to be able to discriminate these kinds of things. But when we can discriminate those and really hold in a very clean, clear way, to what we really believe in, then our mind can be very strong. Then even if people criticize us, we don't get all insecure and filled with self-doubt. When we experience suffering, let's say from illness or sickness, illness or aging or injury, we don't completely melt in the face of that kind of adversity. And also when we practice the Dharma, we don't get discouraged if sometimes we hit bumps along the road in trying to understand what the ultimate nature is. Okay? So this factor of really developing strength and fortitude that allows us to be really firm in the face of adversity. Okay. So that would be a nice quality to have, don't you think? And it has nothing to do with being physically strong. You can be physically strong, but in the face of adversity, completely melt into nothing. You can be physically tiny and have an incredibly strong mind that can face all sorts of difficulties. Okay? So there's 3 kinds of fortitude. One is the fortitude to withstand criticism and blame. That would be very nice, wouldn't it? considering that there's so many obnoxious people out there who criticize and blame us for absolutely no reason at all, even though we're perfectly innocent, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so how to handle, that kind of adversity. The second kind is how to handle the adversity that comes from illness, from when we aren't feeling well, when our body's getting old, when it's weak. Because this is, eventually going to happen, isn't it? We may have our health now, but it's not going to last forever. So how do we deal with a body, as our body gets old and ill? And then the third kind of fortitude is to be able to really delve into the Dharma and meditate on the emptiness of inherent existence and the fact that everything exists dependent on other factors without getting nervous about it. Because as you begin to understand the actual nature of reality, we begin to realize that everything we've been perceiving and believing in now is false. So that can be a little bit unnerving. When you've sunk your whole life into a certain vision of reality, that there's some objective existence out there, and you begin to realize, no, there isn't, that everything arises due to causes and conditions. So to have the fortitude to face reality as it is. So this chapter is quite long. It has, I think, 134, 134 verses. We've gotten up to number 12 last year. So we'll continue on from that. But first of all, I have to make a disclaimer and a little, tell you a little story. That my book, Working with Anger, is taken from this chapter 6 of Shantideva. And my book is completely plagiarized. None of the ideas are my own. I took them all from Shantideva, but he hasn't sued me for plagiarism, fortunately. Actually, I think a true sage wants their ideas spread around, and actually he says that his ideas all came from the Buddha. So, he certainly wants everybody possible to hear the Buddha's teachings. I became interested in this chapter out of necessity. I was in a very difficult situation. My teacher sent me, I had only been ordained 2 years, so I was a baby nun and without much experience. And he sent me to work in a Dharma center in Italy with these macho Italian men, And you put a woman like me who, has her own personality and her own mind and is educated and, I'm not a little, yes, whatever you say kind of person. You send me to work with these, I'm a macho Italian man. And we had, how do I say it politely? Some explosions. Yeah. And so every day, it seemed like they would do something that just completely drove me nutty. And I would get furious. And then at night, I would go back to my room. I would pick up this text. I would open to chapter 6, and I would start meditating on chapter 6. This was like my savior, this book. So by the end of the evening, before I went to bed, I was a little bit calmer, went to bed, got up in the morning, went back to my office, And there were these guys again, criticizing me, ridiculing me, making fun of me. One of them even took my work off my desk, and one of them said I was the worst hindrance that had ever happened to this Buddhist center. And I mean, they did a really nice job humiliating me. So I just wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. I wrote to my teacher because my guru had sent me to work there. I couldn't just leave by myself. So I wrote and I said, Lama, please, can I leave? You know, they're making me create so much negative karma. I'm going to go to the hell room, and it's all their fault. And my teacher wrote back, and he said, oh, yes, dear, we'll talk about it. I'll be there in 6 months. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to make it. But somehow I wrote it out, the 6 months. And when my teacher came, he said I could leave. And that was a big relief. And I went back to Nepal, which, you know, was my original training monastery. And my other teacher was there, and he invited me up to talk with him. And we were sitting on the roof of the house, you know, because in those days in Kopan, you know, you just sat on the roof and looked out at the peaceful valley and everything. And my teacher said to me, because there was one person there, we'll call him Sam, that isn't his real name, but he was especially driving me nuts. And my teacher said, who's kinder to you, the Buddha or Sam? And I thought, what kind of a question is that? So I said, the Buddha, of course, is kinder than Sam. Sam is the reason why I'm creating so much negative karma and why I'm so unhappy. It's all his fault. And the Buddha is the one who, you know, shines light and nectar and helps me calm down. And my teacher looked at me after I said that with just this look like, she still doesn't get it. And then he proceeded to explain to me how Sam is actually kinder than the Buddha. Imagine that. Sam is kinder than the Buddha. I didn't understand. So my teacher explained to me that when you follow the Bodhisattva path, in order to become a Buddha, you have to develop the far-reaching fortitude, or the paramita of fortitude. And in order to develop that paramita, you have to have enemies. You can't develop fortitude without people who harm you. So in that way, Sam was kinder to me than all of the Buddhas, because I couldn't develop fortitude with the Buddhas because they didn't harm me. My teacher told me, you need Sam. I was going, you know. As my mother would say, you need Sam like you need a hole in the head. But my teacher was saying, yes, you need Sam, because that's how you're going to create, you know, generate the fortitude. And without that, you can't become a Buddha. So I was disappointed in that conversation. I really wanted my teacher to say, yes, I know Sam is so obnoxious and drives everybody crazy, but you were so brave to stay in there and work with him, and you're such a good practitioner that you endured all of his abuse. You know, that's what I wanted my teacher to say. I wanted a pat on the back. I wanted some sympathy. That's not what he gave me. He said, Sam is kinder to me than the Buddha. you need Sam. Oh boy. Okay. But it really made me think. And as I thought about this over time, I really came to understand, the value of having people harm you. Of course, that doesn't mean I go out looking for people to harm me. Anyway, I don't need to. They come all by themselves, uninvited. And usually when I get mad, I have forgotten what my teacher said to me that day. But after I remember, then I say, oh yes, this is my opportunity to practice fortitude. This is a really precious, chance to progress along the path. And then I sit down and I meditate on one of the techniques that Shantideva talks about here and that I wrote about in working with anger. Okay? So over time, if you really practice over time, then, your anger does decrease. Or even if you get angry, you're able to catch it quicker and apply the antidote so that you don't get completely crazy from your anger. Because anger can really make us crazy, can't it? When we get out of control anger, it's like we become mad people. We can't control ourselves. We say all sorts of things that we would never say when we're in a regular state of mind. And we do all sorts of things that we would never do when, we're in a regular state of mind. So anger really is dangerous. It's dangerous for other people when we're angry, but it's dangerous for ourselves too, because when we harm others, we create tremendous negative karma. When we get angry, we're just stockpiling so much destructive karma that's going to ripen in our own misery in future lives. So actually, when we get angry, we're the real victim. Yeah, we're the one who's really harmed. So learning to practice fortitude is extremely important if we want to be happy in this life and future lives, as well as if we want to progress on the path to full awakening. So with verse 12 in the book, we're beginning, remember I said there were 3 kinds of fortitude? Verse 12 begins the fortitude of willingly accepting suffering. So that's the fortitude of when suffering comes our way, chiefly through aging or sickness or something like that, how to willingly accept that suffering. Okay. Now, we have to understand what accept suffering means. It doesn't mean that you become masochistic and say, I deserve to suffer, come on, harm me because I'm such a bad person that deserves to suffer. That's rubbish. Okay. And accepting suffering doesn't mean we just sit there and go, oh, I'm suffering, I accept I'm suffering, woe is me, there's nothing to do about it, I'm so unhappy, and I accept all that unhappiness because the world's so unfair. That's not the meaning either. Yeah. Although I think a good number of us spent a good amount of time feeling sorry for ourselves. Yeah? Anybody here feeling sorry for themselves sometimes? A few of us, yeah. We can get really into it. Yeah. When I feel sorry for myself, I want my dear ones, the people I'm closest to notice how miserable I am And to come to me and say, oh, Chodren, you look so unhappy, but you're such a wonderful person. How can I help you? I love you so much. This is what I want to hear, okay? But it's very interesting because when I get unhappy and feel sorry for myself, if somebody comes and says, oh, you look really unhappy, what's the matter? I go, nothing. Turn away, and they go, oh no, really, tell me, what's the matter? Nothing is the matter, And I want them to read my mind and feel sorry for me, and especially if they were the ones who hurt my feelings, even though they had no intention to hurt my feelings, that doesn't matter. Even if, if they hurt my feelings, I don't care, intention or no intention, they should definitely apologize. Yeah. And they should apologize elaborately and tell me how incredibly sorry they are and how really wonderful I am, and would I be so gracious and forgive them. That's what I want. Has it ever happened? No. But that doesn't prevent me from feeling sorry for myself and playing out the scene and hoping someday something will happen like that. But it's never happened. Yeah. When they say, what's wrong? And I go, nothing. Then they walk away. And then when later I said, why didn't you help me when I was unhappy? Well, and they say, well, you said nothing was the matter. And then I get mad. Well, you're supposed to know that when I say nothing, it means something is wrong, And then they say, well, how am I supposed to know? If you don't tell me directly, how am I supposed to read your mind? Well, I don't care. You just are supposed to know anyway. Read my mind. Figure out what you're supposed to do. My problem is your responsibility. You fix it. Okay. I mean, this is what my baby mind does. Yeah? Does your baby mind do that too? Yeah? Sometimes at Shervasti Abbey, we do skits where we kind of take a Dharma theme and we act it out. And I think this would make a fantastic skit, acting out our little, self-pity parties. Because we can be really funny in the way we act and what we do when we feel sorry for ourselves. Yeah. Of course, we don't think it's funny. We think it's really serious. But when you gain some perspective, then you look back at the way you acted and you go, oh my goodness, did I do that? That was so silly. And then you could really laugh at yourself. Anyway, back to the fortitude of willingly accepting suffering, okay? So Shantideva says, the causes of happiness sometimes occur, but the causes for suffering are frequent. Without suffering, there is no renunciation. Therefore, mind, you should stand firm. So he's talking to himself, and he's saying, in samsara, in cyclic existence, our cycle of death and rebirth that is under the control of ignorance and afflictions and polluted karma, in this cycle of rebirth, happiness sometimes occurs. Now, because we're under the influence of ignorance, happiness doesn't always occur because we haven't always created the causes for happiness. So happiness sometimes occurs when we've created those causes and those causes happen to ripen. But the causes for suffering are frequent. Why does he say that? Well, because, our temper comes up very easily, our greed comes up very easily, our spite, our vengeance, ill will, defensiveness, laziness, rebelliousness, how we lie to ourselves, how we lie to others, pretending to be something we aren't, denying what is really true about us. All those, disturbing states of mind are in us, and they come up all the time, don't they? Yeah, we just look at our mind in the course of one day. Yeah, every time we encounter some situation we don't like, our mind goes, doesn't it? We're annoyed, we're irritated, we complain, we backbite, we lie. Yeah, all this kind of stuff. Sometimes big negative deeds, sometimes small negative deeds. But this kind of negativity comes so easily to us. We create negative karma very easily because the three poisonous attitudes of ignorance, anger, and attachment are very strong in our mind. So when he says that the causes of suffering are frequent, that's just referring to how often those three poisonous attitudes arise and how often we act motivated by them. Yeah? Okay. Just look at today. Did you get irritated at somebody today? Anybody? At least one person? Yeah? Who didn't get irritated at one person today? Oh, one person. Two people. Okay. The rest of us got irritated at least one person today. Yeah. So this can happen on a daily basis. And sometimes we get irritated and we don't even notice it. Yeah, but still we were irritated. Yeah. How many of you complained about someone or something today? Yeah, quite a number of us, didn't we? Yeah. Complaining is kind of my hobby. Yeah, nothing better to do than complain. Yeah, it comes so easy. I don't have to exert much effort to complain. Do you? Does it take a lot of energy to complain? Are you ever too tired to complain? No, we always have energy to complain. Okay? So we see, these kinds of things create the causes for suffering. So that's why he says that the causes of suffering are frequent. Okay? Then, without suffering, there is no renunciation. In other words, without having unpleasant experiences, we have no impetus to want to stop our cyclic existence. Okay? The Buddha compared cyclic existence, getting born and reborn, to being in prison. When you don't know you're in prison, or when you think that the food in prison is delicious, and you have this beautiful cell, and so many friends around, then you don't try and get out of prison. Yeah? Do you think somebody who sits in prison and says, "Oh, this is such a lovely place," is thinking correctly? No. Okay. So in a similar way, we're imprisoned by ignorance, anger, and attachment. If we don't realize that we're imprisoned, or if we think, well, cyclic existence is okay. I have some happiness. Okay, I have some suffering, but I have some happiness. It's okay. Then we never try to get out of the prison of cyclic existence. We just stay stuck in it, getting born again and again and again and again. Okay? But when we suffer, when our negative karma ripens and we experience unpleasant situation, that kind of wakes us up. And we realize, oh, this isn't such a wonderful, fantastic situation. Suffering exists. And even I have some suffering now, other people have far greater suffering. And one day I might even have suffering as bad as that of other people. So I can't just kind of sit back, relax, and say, I'll deal with ignorance later on. In the meantime, I want to enjoy sense pleasures. I want a good reputation. I want people to love me. I want to have a nice relationship and beautiful possessions. And later on, when I suffer, then I'll practice the Dharma and try and get free of samsara. Yeah? We think like that, don't we? Kind of live it up now and then pay your bills later. But the thing is, if we live it up now, we're creating more and more negative karma. And then when suffering hits, we have absolutely no mental training. And without the mental training to be able to handle suffering, we're going to completely crumble. And also, when we really have severe suffering, it becomes much more difficult to practice the Dharma. So while we're healthy, while we have so many good conditions right now, we should really practice. Okay? But when we forget, then suffering is our reminder. Suffering says, hey, you're in cyclic existence, you have a precious human life and it doesn't last forever. Try and use it valuably and create good karma and deepen your understanding of the Dharma so you can get out of cyclic existence. Okay. So that leads us to a mind of renunciation. Okay. Renunciation, what do we renounce in Buddhism? Some people think we renounce suffering, we renounce happiness. Oh, look at those monks and nuns, no sex life. They have to eat what's given to them. No makeup, no jewelry, no aftershave, no Botox to get rid of, their wrinkles, can't dye their hair. Yeah, they wear the same clothes day after day. They have to live in a community with a schedule. They can't do what they want and go out to the movies. Oh, what suffering they have. Okay. Actually, we're not renouncing happiness when we practice the Dharma. We're renouncing suffering. Okay? And renunciation doesn't mean you have to become a monk or a nun. But we do have to renounce suffering. Yeah? Unless you really enjoy suffering in cyclic existence, But after a while, when we see that as long as we're in cyclic existence, we are always on the edge of the cliff, about to fall into very gross suffering at any slight change of circumstance. Our life could be simply wonderful right now, and we walk out of here and driving home we get into a car accident. And then our life is forever changed. Forever and ever changed. We're always walking right on that edge because we don't know when some negative karma is going to ripen and cause severe suffering. So we shouldn't just sit back and think, I have such a good life, I don't need to do anything. If we don't want to suffer, we should renounce suffering, and we should also renounce its causes, which are negative actions. And then we should also put some energy into creating the causes for happiness, which are virtuous, wholesome actions. And so that turns our mind towards keeping precepts, towards being generous, towards learning the Dharma and meditating and practicing. Okay? So suffering can be our gentle reminder that turns our mind towards renunciation. So that's why he says, without suffering, there is no renunciation. Yeah, if we don't have suffering, then we just go along. Everything's wonderful. Okay, a couple little problems here and there, but my life is wonderful. I have everything I want. You know, I'm successful at work. I have a great relationship. My kids are doing well. I'm getting promoted. You know, I have a fantastic living situation. I can travel and do this and that. You know, and we just get very, very complacent. And we get kind of lost. So without suffering, there's no renunciation. Okay? And without renunciation, there's no liberation. Yeah, cannot attain nirvana without renunciation. So the conclusion, Shantideva says, is, therefore, mind, he's talking to himself, therefore, mind, you should stand firm. In other words, don't let your suffering overwhelm you. Realize that the causes of happiness sometimes occur, the causes of suffering are many. So don't get all bummed out when the causes of suffering are there, because that's part of our situation. One time, I was having a lot of difficulties with somebody I was working with, and I complained. I told you that's my hobby. I complained to one of my Dharma friends, oh, you know, this person, we used to work together and we got along so well and things were going so well and everything was so nice, and now they're getting all angry at me, na 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 na. And my friend said to me, what do you expect? You're in samsara. And you know, right? He was right. You know, of course, I wanted some sympathy again, you know. Oh, too bad. This person who was such a good friend turned against you. Poor you. You know, I wanted that. But he said, yeah, what do you expect? Your mind's overwhelmed by ignorance, anger, and attachment. You expect everything to be hunky-dory and wonderful? You're foolish. And he was completely right. Yeah. Shantideva goes on. If some ascetics and the people of Karnapa endure the pain of cuts and burns for no reason, then for the sake of liberation, why have I no courage? So certain ascetics in ancient India, they did practices of self-mortification. You know, even the Buddha did that for 6 years when he ate only 1 grain of rice a day and he got so skinny. Yeah. So these ascetics would, you know, walk across fire, stand on their head for days on end, or do all sorts of tortuous practices for their body, thinking that that would bring liberation. Of course it didn't, but they were willing to endure all sorts of discomfort to follow their wrong view. Okay? And the people of Karnapa, these were also some people who did very strange practices, thinking it would lead to liberation, and endured a lot of suffering, but for absolutely no purpose. Yeah. For example, in Catholic monasteries, until the Vatican II, I think it was, 1965, sometimes the monks and nuns would, so until the Second Vatican, then sometimes the Catholic monks and nuns, they would take a, what was it that they used? Like some kind of, cat of 9 tails, some kind of material that was very, you know, harsh, and would beat themselves with it, or wear a shirt made of different hair that was like prickly and itchy, thinking that by torturing the body it would alleviate their sins. Of course it doesn't. Okay? But what Shantideva is saying is that all these people, due to their wrong views, thinking that if they cause themselves suffering, they'll purify, they endure the pain of cuts and burns, but for no reason, because it doesn't purify any negative karma. Okay? But they happily endure all this self-inflicted harm. So if that's the case for them, why, for the sake of liberation, when we've met the correct view, when we know the path to liberation, why do we have no courage to follow that path? Okay? When these people with wrong views endure all sorts of pain that brings them no beneficial result, why, when we have the path and have met the Buddha and the teachings and a teacher and have the perfect opportunity to practice, do we have absolutely no courage? And we go, oh, the Dharma's too hard. I have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and meditate. Of course, you happily get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work and make money. But in order to practice the Dharma, which is really going to bring you happiness, oh, I'm too tired. Right? Yeah. Oh, I can't stay up all so late talking to my friends. Oh, yeah. If I'm going to get up early, I have to go to bed early, so I can't talk to my friends and watch movies and all this kind of fun stuff. Yeah. So, we complain like that about practicing the Dharma. But, even if we have to go to work early in the morning, we don't care. We'll stay up late at night. We'll do everything, and we'll still get up early in the morning. This is saying something about our priorities, isn't it? Yeah, that sometimes our priorities are backwards. Okay. So this is, I like the way Shantideva writes when he says, why have I no courage? Looking inside and saying to ourselves, why do I have no courage to practice the path? Yeah, all these other people do stuff for no good reason. I have so much opportunity. Why am I just not doing it? I must be really silly. Yeah. Then verse 14, there is nothing whatsoever that is not made easier through acquaintance. So through becoming acquainted with small harms, I should learn to patiently accept greater harms. These first two lines are some of the most famous lines of this book that teachers quote a lot. There is nothing whatsoever that is not made easier through acquaintance. In other words, anything we do, as we become familiar with it, it becomes easier. Yeah? Remember when you were learning to type? Of course, now people don't learn to type. They just learn to. Or maybe at the most, this. But, back in the age of the dinosaurs, when I went to school, we had to learn to type. Yeah? And it was so hard. Your fingers got all squiggled and your page was illegible. But the more you practice, the more you learned where the keys were, the more you learned how to type. It was okay. Yeah? When we learned how to drive, at the beginning it was scary. We didn't know what to do. As it became more familiar, we could do it very automatically. Same thing with any kind of skill we have. At the beginning it was hard, but as we got more familiar, it became easier. So that's what Shantideva is saying, is that, anything, even practicing the Dharma, is going to get easier with familiarity. So in other words, we shouldn't just look and say, oh, that's too hard, I can't do it. We should have a courageous mind, and say, I can at least try. And even if I can't master the whole thing completely, I can at least improve. Okay? So, when you start to meditate, your back hurts, your knees hurt, you have all sorts of squirmy, restless energy. But as you practice more and more, your physical energy calms down, you're able to concentrate when you meditate, and it all comes about simply through familiarity. So we shouldn't shy away from things that are new, or even things that are difficult, But if there's long-term Dharma benefit to be gained from something, then we should do it, and we should do it with a courageous mind. Yeah? Okay. So through becoming acquainted with small harms, I should learn to patiently accept greater harms. Okay, so we're all sitting here in this hall with no aircon. We've been so pampered in Singapore. If you think about it, 50 years ago, how many people had aircon houses to start with 50 years ago? Yeah, if you talk to your parents when they were growing up, or your grandparents, did they have aircon? No. Yeah, what did they do in the evening? They sat outside and talked to their neighbors. And some of them may not have even had electricity. So hot, la. But, they got used to it, didn't they? And the heat didn't bother them. They grew up with it. It was hot. They were used to it. But now we're so used to aircon that when we have to sit in a room like this without aircon, how much suffering it is. Why didn't they fix the aircon? Didn't they know I was coming? As if everybody in this beautiful place should stop and fix the aircon because of us. They have nothing better to do in life. Okay? But if we sit here for a while, we get used to it, don't we? When you first came, you thought, how am I going to make it through a whole Dharma talk with no aircon? And now you've made it near through the, most of the talk. Congratulations. Okay? So what he's saying is, we practice with small harms, and that develops our ability to endure greater harms. So if you go to work tomorrow and the aircon isn't working, it'll be a breeze. Because you'll have so much practice. Okay? So, even though we may encounter difficulties in our life, if we get familiar with the situation, it gets easier. Yeah? Sometimes we look at things that we have to do, and we go, I don't want to do that. How can I do that? It's too hard, it's too difficult, or people will criticize me, even though it's the right thing to do. We go, people will criticize me, I don't want to get criticized. Yeah? But if we get used to small criticisms, then big criticisms don't bother us so much anymore. It's this thing, if you just get used to something, you realize that it's not really such a big deal. Mm-hmm. I remember when my niece was about 7 years old, she looked at me and she said, "You wear the same clothes every day." As if, like, wow, how can you stand to do that? Yeah. But, you do it and it's easy. You get used to it. Yeah. People can always find you in a public place. Yeah. Very easy. Okay. Verse 15. Who has not seen this to be so with trifle sufferings, such as the bites of snakes and insects, feelings of hunger and thirst, and with such minor things as rashes? So when he says, who has not seen this to be so, what he's referring to is the previous verse, that things get easier with familiarity. So he's saying we've all seen with our own experience that with trifling sufferings, like you get bitten by a snake, not a poisonous ones, but a snake, or insect bites, you get used to it. It stops becoming such a big deal. Feelings of hunger, feelings of thirst, we've all been hungry before. We don't collapse when we're hungry. We've all been thirsty. We don't collapse when we're thirsty. We get used to it. We can endure some hunger and thirst. We can endure some mosquito bites. And rashes, we've all had rashes, haven't we? We know it's not such a big deal. So what he's saying is, we can endure small sufferings. And in that way, we train our mind to become stronger so that when we have big sufferings, our mind can stand firm and our mind can be courageous. Okay, so this may be big physical sufferings or also big mental sufferings, because for some of us, we've had much more mental suffering in our life than physical suffering, haven't we? So you start out with, small mental sufferings and you get used to them, and then when some big mental suffering comes along, you can endure that as well. You don't fall apart. Okay. Verse 16. I should not be impatient with heat and cold. See, I told you it mentioned heat. With heat and cold, wind and rain, sickness, bondage, and beatings. For if I am, the harm they cause me will increase. Okay, so before he was talking about training our mind with small sufferings to endure big sufferings. Here, he's saying, if we can't control our mind when bigger sufferings come, like severe heat, cold, wind, rain, sickness, you get very, very sick, or bondage, you're imprisoned for no reason at all, or kidnapped, or something like that, or beatings, somebody beats you, again, for no reason. Yeah, because we should practice so that we don't get impatient and angry and upset when those kind of situations happen. Because if we do, then the harm of those situations increases. Okay, so for example, when you have the flu, there's the physical suffering of having the flu, right? If on top of that you get really upset about having the flu, why do I have the flu? This isn't fair. I'm so tired of lying in bed. All my friends are going out and having a good time and I want to be with them too. I hate having the flu and nobody takes care of me and I feel so crummy. If we have that kind of mental attitude, we're actually increasing our suffering, aren't we? Because first there's the suffering of the flu, but then there's the mental suffering of our unhappy, complaining, angry, upset mind. And what's very interesting to observe is sometimes the physical suffering is very small, but we feel like it's huge because our mind has blown it up. Okay? So when you sit, let's say you're learning to meditate, you sit cross-legged, then your knee starts to hurt. Okay? So instead of just, okay, there's a sensation in my knee, yeah, and just watching that sensation, we go, oh, my knee hurts. Oh, my knee hurts so bad. I've got to move my legs. If I don't move my legs, I'm going to be crippled forever. My knee is never going to move again. These muscles are going to get constricted, and I'll never walk again. And then we get so anxious and uptight and fearful. Okay? If we actually looked at the situation, there's just some sensation in our knee. It's not really that terrible, but our mind makes it huge, huge, you know? Or let's say you have something happen with a friend. You know, you have a good friend, and then they get a little bit mad at you for something, who knows what. This kind of stuff always happens. And then you go, oh, my friend is mad at me. Oh, this is terrible. I'm responsible for all of his pain. He's never going to like me again. I'm such a bad person. He's going to tell the world how mean I was. Nobody's going to like me. Ah. Sometimes we do that too, don't we? We exaggerate the whole situation. So there's in fact just some tiny unpleasantness in the relationship, but then we like blow it up into this huge thing, and we suffer because we exaggerate the harm of something. Okay? So that's what he's getting at here. That if we don't learn to control our mind, we wind up with, you know, a huge pile of suffering in the end. Okay. Okay, let's pause right here. Let's pause at the end of verse 16. There's a little bit of time for questions, if you have some questions. If you want to write your questions down and pass them up, you can. Or if anybody wants to ask something from the floor, please do. Okay. Yeah. Oh, it's not working. It's just a little suffering to go to the mic in the front. Okay. That mic's not working either. Oh, no, it's fine. I'll loan you my mic.
So we have ignorance, anger, and attachment that creates a lot of our suffering and our negative karma, and we need to let go of that. Mm-hmm. So then we get into the next step, which is renunciation. Mm-hmm. Renunciation of the negative actions, renunciation of the patterns of behavior. Mm-hmm. But so you were mentioning, or Shantideva was mentioning, that the renunciation is initiated from our suffering. Because we suffer so much, you want to say, oh, I want to give up. So that causes the process of renunciation. But maybe the renunciation can also be initiated through wisdom, through logic, through seeing it through clearly, and not having to actually suffer more.
Okay, so his question is saying, can't renunciation also be generated through wisdom and logic without us having to have suffering first? Okay? Yeah, but I think even that wisdom and logic, why is it that we want to change our situation? Because we realize there's something unsatisfactory with it. Actually, when Santideva says the word suffering, this is a big translation error that they often have in English, is translating the Sanskrit and Pali word dukkha as suffering. It actually means unsatisfactory conditions. So here, we have unsatisfactory conditions. We use our wisdom to see that these conditions are unsatisfactory, and so is our anger and ignorance and attachment. They're unsatisfactory and they make us miserable and they cause damage in the world. And so that kind of wisdom leads us to want to give up all those unsatisfactory conditions. Okay, make sense? Okay, so if out of ignorance we keep committing a non-virtuous action and we have no intention to stop doing it, does doing Vajrasattva meditation count? So Vajrasattva meditation is, Vajrasattva is one form of the Buddha. He's somewhere around here. Oh, I saw the picture out back there. Anyway, so Vajrasattva is one form of the Buddha. We do that practice to help us purify. So this person is saying, if out of ignorance we keep committing a non-virtuous action again and again and we have no intention to stop, does doing Vajrasattva help? Well, here I think what isn't clear is when we say out of ignorance, does it mean that we have no idea at all that the action is non-virtuous? Yeah, for example, we have no idea at all that lying is non-virtuous, so we keep doing it and don't intend to stop. Is it that? Or is it more that we know it's non-virtuous, but we don't really want to stop? Yeah, so I'm wondering, in other words, we know it's non-virtuous, but we're so kind of ignorant that we say, well, it's just a little negativity, it doesn't really, in fact, maybe it's not even negative at all. Yeah, so we kind of rationalize, justify, things like that. So then, does doing purification count? Yes, purification can still help. It's not going to help you stop that negative action, but it will help you purify other negativities that you've done. And in the process of doing purification, that veil of ignorance may be lifted so that you can actually realize that that's a negative action and come to want to stop it. I just started practice and I often wonder, can I still have fun and go to movies while practicing the Dharma? Sometimes I'm scared that I will burn out from intense practice. We laugh, but many people have this concern at the beginning. It's like, oh, it sounds like Dharma is so serious. Abandon negativity and practice virtue and, can't I ever relax and, have fun anymore? Do I look like I'm a totally miserable person? Yeah? When you look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama, does he look like miserable and unhappy and, full of gloom and doom? No, not at all. Okay, so of course you can have fun. Yeah. In fact, when you practice the Dharma, you start reducing your ignorance, anger, and attachment, so you have more fun because your attachment isn't getting in the way by making you crave things. And your anger isn't getting in the way by making you annoyed and irritated and upset all the time. And your jealousy is not getting in the way by, making you envious of other people. So, if you practice, you actually have more fun. Yeah. You may change your definition of what fun is. Yeah. I mean, maybe you might decide that seeing movies full of violence isn't entertaining anymore. I don't think that would be such a bad thing to change our mind on. We see violent movies as so entertaining, don't we? The more violence, the more sex. Why do we get off on, watching people kiss in movies and watching people kill each other in movies? Why is that entertaining? So, after a while, you may decide that Hollywood is really kind of boring. Yeah. But you'll find other things that are really, really interesting to you, that you have much more fun doing. Okay, one more question tonight. Let's see. Good question. In this samsara full of craving, which causes a lot of attachment to materialistic things, such as wealth and relationships, how do we make a start to overcome craving so that our wisdom will grow? Good question, isn't it? We have so much craving and attachment, that we want material goods, we want relationships, we want praise and approval and status and honor. And how do we even begin to reduce that kind of craving? Yeah, because we all have that craving, don't we? I think one of the things that can begin to help us reduce it is by really examining what happens in our lives when we let craving run our life. Okay? So to just sit there and look at the effects of craving in our life. Yeah? Just do research in our own life experience. What happens when I'm full of attachment and I want this and I want that and I don't want to be separated from this person, and I want to be with that person and I don't want a bad reputation? What happens? Are we happier or more miserable when we have craving and attachment? And what happens when we have craving and attachment and we don't get what we want? Yeah, then we're really bummed out. And the problem isn't that we didn't get what we want. The problem is that we have so much craving and attachment to start with. So I think just looking at our experience and seeing the disadvantages of craving and attachment, that itself, helps us to say, wow, if I want to be happy, and we all want to be happy, then I want to reduce my craving and attachment. So then you just start, again, small. You don't start huge, you start small. Yeah? And start with some of the attachments that cause you the most suffering. Because it's easier to eliminate things that cause you suffering. So start with those attachments that really cause suffering. For example, the attachment that makes you overeat. That attachment, we eat too much, the suffering is immediate, isn't it? So then, if we remember that suffering, then when we start to eat, we say, okay, I don't want to suffer, so I'm not going to overeat. Yeah? And you start working that way with it. Okay? Then you progress onto, deeper and more complex issues of craving and attachment. And you just start peeling those away through your wisdom because you see how much they make you suffer. Okay, so we're going to pause here in the teaching. And I think, did all of you receive, oh, I don't even have one of the Chenrezig cards? Do you all have the, yes, that's the Chenrezig card. Thank you. Okay, so Shravasti Abbey, we're building Chenrezig Hall. Chenrezig is the Tibetan name for Kuan Yin. So we're naming this new building after Kuan Yin because our idea is that then with 1,000 arms we will welcome all the guests with compassion to the Abbey. So we're asking people to help us accumulate as a group 21 million recitations of Om Mani Padme Hum. So there's a very short practice here of doing Chenrezig, which we will do really super quickly this evening, just so you can get a taste of it. And then we're asking if you would just recite the mantra at home and help us with it. Okay? And then let us know how many you have recited. So these cards, you're welcome to take them home and do the practice and let us know how many recitations. If you don't want to do that, then just leave the card, back there when you leave, or take the card and give it to a friend if you want to. Okay, so we're going to do this little meditation on Chenrezig right now. Okay, so I'll just describe the visualization. We're going to imagine Chenrezig, and then we'll recite a few verses together and do Chenrezig's mantra. Okay, so come back to your breath for a moment. And on the crown of your head, imagine Chenrezig, Kuan Yin, with 1,000 arms and a body made of white light, full of compassion and wisdom, looking out at you and all sentient beings with so much compassion. And then we'll say the prayer of taking refuge and generating bodhicitta just once because of time constraint. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. Then we'll recite together, may all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger.